Welcome back to Tales of the Dark. Tonight we opened the fourth chamber of the Curse Vault. And what you are about to hear is not simply the story of a cursed object, but the story of something that waits for silence before it sings. Because in 1956, in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Ashford County, 80-year-old Eleanor Whitmore vanished from her bedroom between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. without signs of forced entry, without broken windows, without disturbed floorboards. And the only object investigators found out of place was a small porcelain music box sitting open on her bedside table. Though according to her parents, it had been stored in the attic for years. And this detail would have meant nothing if not for what happened 3 days later at her candlelight vigil. Because, as mourners stood in the Whitmore living room, sharing stories and clutching photographs, the attic above them echoed with a faint, mechanical melody, soft at first, barely audible beneath the sound of grief, until someone whispered, "Do you hear that?" And the room fell silent, and from directly overhead came the unmistakable winding chime of a music box playing a lullaby Eleanor, his mother, had not heard since the child was 5, a melody called Sleep, My Little Star, a custom tune embedded into the mechanism by Eleanor's grandfather years before his death. And when Eleanor's father climbed the attic steps, trembling, flashlight shaking in his grip, he found the music box sitting alone in the center of the dusty floorboards, lid open, slowly turning, though no one had wound it. And this is where the pattern begins, because the night before Eleanor disappeared, her grandfather had passed away in his hospital bed exactly at 2:47 a.m., and family members later confirmed that, at precisely 3 a.m., 13 minutes after his official time of death, the music box in the attic began playing for the first time in years. And Eleanor had told her mother earlier that week that she heard Grandpa humming upstairs, though her grandfather had been hospitalized for days. And if that detail unsettles you, understand that investigators initially dismissed the music box as coincidence, assuming someone at the vigil had unknowingly disturbed the mechanism until the second death occurred. Because 2 weeks after Eleanor's disappearance, her babysitter, Margaret Hale, was found unresponsive in her apartment from an apparent aneurysm, and neighbors reported hearing faint music in the hallway outside her unit around 3 a.m., a melody described as old-fashioned and childlike. And when police entered the apartment, they found no music source present. But in Margaret's purse was a folded newspaper clipping about Eleanor's case, and on the back of that clipping, in trembling pen, Margaret had written the words, "It plays before someone goes." And this is when the Whitmore family turned the music box over to authorities, demanding it be removed from their home. But before it was collected, Eleanor's mother made one final observation that investigators recorded but never released publicly. She claimed that the porcelain ballerina inside the box, which rotated slowly when the melody played, had changed position slightly each time. It activated not dramatically, not enough to be immediately obvious, but enough that the figurine appeared gradually angled toward the doorway instead of the mirror inside the lid, as though it were turning to face someone entering the room. And the mechanism itself showed no sign of tampering, no hidden speaker, no radio frequency trigger. And engineers testing the device concluded that without manual winding it should not produce sound at all. Yet during its temporary storage inside the Ashford evidence locker, 3 officers independently filed reports of hearing faint music at 3 a.m. on separate nights, each time correlating with a death logged within city limits minutes earlier. And here is the part that shifts this case from tragic coincidence to something far darker. Because when archivists later mapped time of death records against reported instances of the music box playing, a disturbing synchronization emerged. The melody did not signal Eleanor's disappearance. It synchronized with death itself, specifically deaths connected emotionally to someone who had recently seen or handled the box. And that suggests this object does not simply haunt a location. It follows attachment, proximity, awareness. And if you're thinking this sounds familiar, remember the pattern of the mirror. Awareness begins the alignment. Because by 1962, after 7 correlated incidents, the music box was classified as an anomalous artifact and transferred quietly into restricted storage. But before transport, One final field test was conducted that still disturbs investigators to this day, because a detective assigned to catalog the item reported hearing the melody faintly while seated alone in the evidence room at 2:59 a.m. And instead of ignoring it, instead of stepping away, he did something no one else had dared to do. He reached forward and manually wound the key himself, and as the spring tightened, the melody grew louder, richer, almost layered, as if two overlapping recordings were playing simultaneously, one mechanical and one distant, almost like humming beneath the notes. And when the lid fully opened, the detective froze, because the ballerina inside was no longer angled toward the mirror. It was facing outward, directly at him, and for a brief moment, he claimed he saw the reflection inside the lid, not of himself, but of a child standing behind him, with her head slightly tilted. And before he could turn around, the melody stopped abruptly. Not gradually, as music boxes do when their tension fades, but mid-note cut clean, and at exactly 3 a.m. Dispatch received a call from the local hospital, reporting the death of Eleanor Whitmore's mother from sudden cardiac arrest, and the detective would later resign, stating only that the music box doesn't play to announce death. It plays to welcome it. And if that statement feels like superstition, understand that the object has now been secured within the curse vault for decades, and yet once every few years, technicians conducting routine inspections of the sealed containment chamber report faint vibration readings at precisely 3 a.m., despite the box being locked inside a non-acoustic reinforced case, and no one has wound it since 1962. But the question that continues to echo inside the vault is not whether it plays, but who it plays for next. And if you are watching this late at night, and you think you hear something faint in the background, something delicate and mechanical beneath the silence, resist the instinct to search for the source. Because in part 2 we examine what happened when an audio engineer attempted to isolate and enhance the melody, only to discover something hidden beneath the lullaby that was never meant to be heard. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. Welcome back to Tales of the Dark. And before we continue, understand that what you are about to hear was not taken from rumor or folklore, but from archived audio analysis reports sealed alongside the Whitmore music box inside the curse vault, because after the object was transferred into restricted containment in 1962, the melody did not stop. It simply became less frequent, less obvious, almost patient, as if waiting for someone curious enough to listen closely. And that someone arrived in 1978, when an independent acoustic engineer, named Daniel Kessler, was contracted to analyze anomalous vibration readings detected within the reinforced storage chamber readings that spiked precisely at 3 a.m. on scattered nights across several months, despite the box remaining unwound, locked, and physically untouched. And Daniel approached the case skeptically, assuming structural expansion, pressure imbalance, or mechanical memory within the spring mechanism. But he insisted on one condition before submitting his report. He wanted to capture the sound directly, not rely on anecdotal testimony. So he installed a series of high-sensitivity contact microphones along the exterior of the containment case, layered with ambient recorders to detect airborne frequencies beyond standard human hearing. And for 6 consecutive nights, nothing registered beyond normal building acoustics, until on the 7th night, at 2:59 a.m., a low-frequency harmonic tremor appeared on the waveform display, subtle but distinct. And at 3 a.m., exactly the contact mic nearest the music box lid captured the faint, unmistakable notes of sleep. My little star, soft but mechanically consistent, and yet something else rode beneath it. Something Daniel initially mistook for distortion, a subharmonic layer fluctuating just below audible range, almost like breath passing through a hollow chamber. And when he amplified the recording in his studio later that morning, he made a discovery that altered the direction of the investigation entirely, because embedded within the lullaby at irregular intervals were faint vocal patterns not present in the original mechanical tune, syllabic fragments that, when slowed and isolated, resembled a child's whisper repeating a phrase too fragmented to understand clearly. And Daniel, driven by professional obsession rather than fear, enhanced the track further using spectral separation techniques. peeling back frequency layers like removing paint from an old wall. And what emerged beneath the melody was not a single voice but two, one childlike, soft, almost humming along with the tune, and another older, distorted, low, as if spoken through fabric or from behind a closed door. And according to his handwritten notes, the child's voice seemed to say, "I'm here," while the deeper voice repeated a phrase he transcribed as, "It's time." And if you believe this could be pareidolia, the human brain forcing patterns onto noise, consider what happened next. Because Daniel scheduled a second recording session under controlled conditions, sealing the chamber, powering down non-essential equipment, and positioning himself alone in the monitoring room adjacent to the vault. And at 2:58 a.m., he began a live feed capture. And for 2 minutes there was silence. Absolute silence. Until at exactly 3 a.m., the melody began again. Clearer than before, louder through the contact mic than it had any logical right to be given the sealed containment. And as he monitored the waveform in real time, he noticed something impossible. The subharmonic layer beneath the music was modulating. In response to his breathing, rising slightly when he inhaled, dipping when he exhaled, as though the recording were synchronizing with him. And this detail shook him enough to check the equipment for cross-feedback, but all systems showed isolated input, no loop, no contamination. And then, at 3:01 a.m., the melody stopped mid-note, exactly as it had decades earlier in the Detective S report. And Daniel removed his headphones slowly, heart pounding, convinced he had captured enough evidence to explain the anomaly, until his phone rang at 3:02 a.m., and on the other end was his sister, sobbing, informing him that their father had just passed away unexpectedly from a stroke at precisely 3 a.m. And if you think coincidence can stretch that far, understand that Daniel had never physically touched the music box, never wound it, never even seen it uncovered, and yet he had listened, he had isolated the melody, he had pulled apart its layers. And from that night forward, he reported hearing faint strains of the lullaby in quiet rooms, even when no recording device was present. Subtle enough to question, but persistent enough to disturb. And 3 days later, he was found dead in his apartment studio. No sign of forced entry, no trauma, simply seated at his mixing desk with headphones around his neck and the waveform of sleep. My little star frozen on his monitor. And here is the detail investigators documented, but never released publicly, in the reflection of his pallid-off screen, barely visible in the low resolution photograph taken at the scene. A small figure appears, standing behind him with its head tilted slightly to the left, and since that incident, the containment protocols surrounding the music box have changed drastically, because researchers now believe the object does not merely activate at death, but resonates with it, aligning its melody with the exact moment a life ends. And more disturbingly, responding to those who attempt to dissect it, analyze it, or understand it too deeply, as though curiosity itself becomes a tuning fork, amplifying the signal between the artifact and the observer. And this theory gained terrifying weight in 1984, when an archivist reviewing Daniel S. enhanced recordings reported hearing her own name faintly layered beneath the child S. whispered during playback, though no such audio appeared on the raw file when others listened, suggesting that the music may personalize itself depending on who hears it, adapting, selecting, harmonizing with individual perception. And if that is true, then the melody is not fixed but responsive, not a simple mechanical tune but a carrier wave for something that communicates through grief, through loss, through the thin space between life and its absence. And this reframes the most chilling detail of all. Eleanor Whitmore did not disappear on the night the music box first played. She disappeared 3 days later, meaning the melody may not signal immediate death, but impending absence. And if absence is what it tracks, then every time it plays inside the curse vault, somewhere beyond those reinforced walls, a life may be shifting toward silence. And in part 3, we examined the sealed transcript of the final live experiment conducted in 1991, when researchers attempted to disrupt the melody mid-playback by physically damaging the mechanism, only to discover that the sound did not stop when the gears broke, and what continued playing was not mechanical at all. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare," the antique shop owner warned me, his eyes wide with a fear I didn't understand. He said the music box was cursed, that it resonated with death. I thought it was just a sales tactic, a bit of spooky folklore to make a quick buck. I was so wrong. The first time I heard its melody, a chilling, dissonant tune, was the night my neighbor's dog, the one that barked incessantly, went silent forever. The allure of the unknown, the whispers from beyond the veil. For centuries, humanity has been fascinated by the possibility of life after death, of spirits lingering in our world. Objects, they say, can become conduits, vessels for these lost souls. Tonight, we delve into the chilling case of the Department of Parapsychological Research and their fateful encounter with a seemingly innocent music box. A story that blurs the line between scientific inquiry and supernatural horror. Our story begins in the fall of 1978. Dr. Alistair Finch, a respected but controversial parapsychologist, founded the DPR. His team was a collection of bright, open-minded individuals. Eleanor Vance, a gifted clairvoyant, Ben Carter, a skeptical but brilliant audio engineer, and Sarah Jenkins, a meticulous researcher and historian. They operated out of a dusty university basement, armed with EVP recorders, EMF meters, and a shared passion for peering into the abyss. Their reputation grew with each case they investigated, debunking hoaxes and documenting genuine, inexplicable phenomena. But nothing could have prepared them for the arrival of the Orpheus box. The music box was an antique, exquisitely crafted from dark, polished wood with intricate silver inlays. It was brought to them by an elderly woman, a Mrs. Gable, who claimed it had belonged to her late grandmother and had been a source of terror in her family for generations. She spoke of a melody that played on its own, a tune that seemed to drain the warmth from any room and was often followed by unsettling whispers and shadowy figures seen from the corner of the eye. The team was intrigued. Initial examinations revealed nothing out of the ordinary. It was a standard wind-up music box, its mechanism simple, its tune a melancholic, forgotten lullaby. Ben, the skeptic, was convinced it was a case of overactive imagination, fueled by family folklore. But Eleanor felt something different. From the moment she touched the box, she described a profound coldness, a sense of deep, ancient sorrow, clinging to it like a shroud. The first official investigation began on a cold October night. They set up their equipment in a controlled environment, a soundproofed chamber in their lab. Cameras rolled, recorders were active, and the air was thick with anticipation. Alistair carefully wound the key. The first few notes of the lullaby tinkled through the silence. It was a beautiful, haunting melody, but as it played, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The temperature plummeted several degrees, a fact confirmed by their thermal cameras. Ben, monitoring the audio feeds, suddenly went pale. "I'm getting something," he whispered, his voice tense. On a frequency below human hearing, he amplified the signal. A low, guttural whisper filled the control room, a distorted voice speaking in a language none of them could identify. Goosebumps erupted on everyone's arms. On the video feed, a fine mist seemed to coalesce around the music box, swirling in time with the melody. Then, just as the tune ended, a dark, fleeting shape darted past the camera lens. The activity escalated over the following weeks. The music box would start playing on its own, always at 3:13 a.m. The disembodied whispers became clearer, more menacing. Sarah's research uncovered the box's origins. It was crafted in the late 1800s by a toy maker named Silas Croft, a man who lost his young daughter Lily to a sudden illness. Consumed by grief, Croft became obsessed with spiritualism, believing he could trap his daughter's soul within her favorite music box so she would never leave him. The lullaby was the one he wrote for her. Eleanor attempted to make contact. During one session, she entered a trance-like state, her hand hovering over the box. She described seeing a little girl, lost and afraid, trapped in a cold, dark place. But she also sensed another presence, something much older and more malevolent, attached to the child's spirit, feeding on her energy. a parasite. This entity, she warned, was what was communicating through the box. It was not the child. It was using her as bait. The team decided on a final, risky experiment, a full-blown spiritual containment. They hoped to separate the child's spirit from the malevolent entity and help her cross over. They set up the chamber with symbols of protection, salt lines, and specialized energy dampeners. Ben had configured a device he called the Sonic Purge, designed to emit a frequency that would theoretically disrupt the entity's manifestation. As the clock ticked past 3 a.m., the lab grew unnaturally cold. The music box sprang to life, its melody more discordant and frantic than ever before. The lights flickered violently. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were screams, a cacophony of rage that blasted through the speakers. On the monitors, the shadowy figure was no longer fleeting. It was a solid, towering mass of darkness, coalescing in the center of the room, its form shifting and writhing. Alistair shouted for Ben to activate the Sonic Purge. Ben flipped the switch, and a high-pitched hum filled the air. The dark mass recoiled, letting out a shriek that shattered a nearby beaker. For a moment, it seemed to be working. But then, the entity lashed out. A surge of unseen energy blew the main circuit breaker, plunging the entire lab into pitch darkness. The emergency generator failed to kick in. Panic erupted. In the blackness, they could hear the music box playing faster and faster, its tune a mocking, insane carnival theme. They heard things being thrown around the chamber, the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass. Eleanor screamed, a sharp, piercing cry of pain. Alistair and Ben fumbled for flashlights, their hands shaking. When they finally got a beam of light into the chamber, the scene was one of chaos. The equipment was destroyed. The protective circle of salt was broken. The music box lay on the floor, silent. Sarah was huddled in a corner, sobbing uncontrollably. Eleanor was unconscious, with 3 deep, parallel scratches on her arm. And Dr. Alistair Finch was gone, vanished. The official report, heavily redacted, stated that Dr. Finch suffered a psychological breakdown and fled the facility. The Department of Parapsychological Research was quietly disbanded shortly after. Ben and Sarah never spoke of that night again, leaving the field of parapsychology entirely. Eleanor recovered physically, but was forever changed, refusing to ever use her abilities again. The Orpheus box was confiscated and locked away in a high-security evidence vault, where it remains to this day. Some say that on quiet nights, security guards can still hear a faint, melancholic lullaby echoing from deep within the vault. A chilling reminder of the night science challenged the darkness, and the darkness answered back. The fate of Dr. Alistair Finch remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the annals of paranormal research. Was he a victim of a powerful, malevolent entity, or did he simply step too close to the edge and fall into madness? We may never know for sure. Thank you for joining us on this unsettling journey. If you find stories like this as fascinating as we do, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the unknown. Until next time, stay curious, and perhaps, keep a close eye on those old family heirlooms. You never know what secrets they might be holding. Welcome back to Tales of the Dark. And by now, you understand that the Whitmore music box no longer behaves like a broken antique. It behaves like an echo that refuses to fade. After the 1991 mechanical disruption test proved the melody could continue without gears, without tension, without physical cause, the curse vault reclassified the artifact. It went from mechanical anomaly to resonant anomaly, meaning the object was no longer considered the source of the sound, but the anchor point for something that might exist independently of it. For 15 years, the box remained sealed in reinforced containment, untouched, unobserved except through limited non-audio surveillance. Then, in 2006, an entirely unrelated vault chamber triggered a minor review that would change the trajectory of this case permanently. Vault Chamber C12, housing a collection of confiscated 19th century mourning jewelry. reported a brief vibration fluctuation at 3 a.m. It was detected by structural sensors embedded in the foundation. At first, technicians assumed it was just routine thermal contraction. But when security footage from the corridor outside C12 was reviewed, something subtle appeared in the audio waveform attached to the camera feed. It wasn't loud enough to be heard in real time, not strong enough to register as a disturbance, but it was present when the recording was isolated and amplified. 3 faint ascending notes, matching the opening of Sleep, My Little Star. What made this discovery impossible to ignore was that chamber C12 was located 2 reinforced corridors away from the music box as containment vault, separated by non-acoustic insulated walls designed specifically to prevent cross-chamber contamination, and no vibration spike had been recorded inside the music box chamber itself that night. This meant the melody did not originate from its anchor point. This single anomaly forced investigators to confront a possibility they had been quietly avoiding. What if the music box was no longer necessary for the melody to manifest? What if it had served its purpose and the resonance had begun propagating beyond it? To test this theory without directly engaging the box, technicians initiated a passive audio sweep across all vault corridors for a 30-day period. They set detection algorithms to flag any tonal pattern resembling the lullaby's frequency signature. For 29 nights, nothing triggered beyond environmental noise. Then, on the 30th night, at precisely 2 hours 59 minutes and 47 seconds a.m., a faint harmonic spike registered, not in the music box chamber, not in C12, but in corridor D3, a hallway that contained no artifacts at all, only reinforced doors and blank walls. At 3 a.m. exactly, the spike resolved into a recognizable melodic fragment, lasting less than 2 seconds before dissolving into silence. The most chilling detail of that event is this. At the exact moment the fragment appeared, a maintenance worker stationed in corridor 503 reported feeling a sudden drop in temperature behind him, followed by the unmistakable sensation of someone standing at ankle height near his left side. When he glanced down, there was nothing visible. No shadow, no object. Yet his body camera footage later revealed a faint flicker near the floor, resembling the brief outline of a small rotating shape, like a ballerina turning once before fading. 3 days later, that maintenance worker's wife died unexpectedly in her sleep at 3 a.m. from undiagnosed cardiac failure. This correlation broke the final boundary between object-based haunting and environmental resonance. The maintenance worker had never seen the music box, never heard its melody prior to that night, yet the proximity event still aligned with loss. This suggested the signal may now operate through exposure to space rather than an object. And if that theory is accurate, then the curse vault itself may function as a resonance chamber, amplifying what the music box initiated decades earlier. What disturbs researchers most is the mapping pattern that followed. Subsequent passive sweeps detected faint fragments of the lullaby at increasing distances from the original containment site, first in adjacent corridors, then near exterior loading docks, then once, faintly, near the building's perimeter fence line. Always subtle, always brief, always at exactly 3 a.m., while not every spike correlated immediately with a recorded death. Statistical analysis revealed a pattern of elevated mortality within 72 hours in geographical clusters near each detection site. That data forced the Oversight Board to consider relocation of the entire vault facility. Yet funding and secrecy constraints prevented immediate action. So instead, they initiated what they called acoustic null protocol, a system of low-frequency countertones, played continuously throughout the structure to dampen potential harmonic spread. For several months, the spikes ceased entirely, leading some to believe the resonance had been suppressed, until one night, during a routine recalibration of the countertone generators, the system briefly powered down for 14 seconds, starting at 2:59 a.m. Within that narrow window, every microphone inside the building captured the same thing simultaneously. Not just 3 notes, not just a fragment, but the full opening measure of Sleep, My Little Star, clear, unified, resonant across every corridor, as though the building itself had become the music box. Several staff members reported hearing it audibly, without enhancement, describing the sound as distant, but unmistakable. When the countertones reactivated at 3 hours 0 minutes and 14 seconds AM, the melody ceased instantly. No vibration spike registered in the original containment chamber that night. 3 days later, the chief engineer responsible for acoustic null protocol was killed in a single car accident on an empty road at exactly 3 AM. And if coincidence still feels plausible, consider this final observation, documented in internal notes. During playback of that 14-second multi-corridor recording, analysts discovered a faint whisper layered beneath the melody that had not appeared in prior captures. It was clearer this time, more defined. A child's voice softly sang, "It's bigger now," followed by the low, distorted tone responding, "It's learning." That phrase shifted the entire interpretation of the artifact. Because if the resonance is adaptive, if it expands through awareness, if each attempt to suppress it forces it to propagate further, then the music box was never the threat. It was the starting point. The tuning fork that introduced a frequency into our environment that cannot be unheard. And this brings us to the final revelation, in part 5, the internal proposal to destroy not the music box, but every recording of its melody, and what happened when they attempted to erase the sound from existence entirely. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. It all started with a hard drive. I'm a music producer, and I'm always scavenging for old gear, vintage samples, anything with a bit of character. I bought a box of used studio equipment from an estate sale, and tucked away at the bottom was a dusty external hard drive. Score. I figured it might have some forgotten synth patches or rare drum breaks. Back at my studio, I plugged it in. Most of the files were jumbled tax documents, blurry photos, but one file caught my eye. It was just called Melody. No extension, no date, just melody. Curiosity got the better of me. I managed to import it into my audio software. The waveform was strange, almost too perfect. Like a digital sine wave but with jagged, unpredictable peaks. I hit play. The sound that filled my headphones was hypnotic. It was a music box tune, simple and childlike, but with an underlying current of something deeply melancholic. It felt ancient, like it was echoing from a long-forgotten nursery. The notes were clear, but there was a faint, almost imperceptible hiss underneath, like static or the sound of a failing tape. I listened to it on loop for maybe an hour, completely mesmerized. It was beautiful, but it left me with a strange sense of unease, a cold knot in my stomach. I decided to use it. I built a whole track around it, a dark, ambient piece. The melody was the centerpiece. I finished it late that night and uploaded it to my music sharing profile, feeling pretty proud of my creation. I titled it The Found Lullaby. Then, I tried to delete the original melody file to clear up space. File cannot be deleted, the pop-up said. The file is in use. Strange. I checked my audio software, task manager, everything. Nothing was using it. I shrugged, figured it was a computer glitch, and shut everything down for the night. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of notifications. My track had gone viral overnight, but the comments were weird. "This melody is stuck in my head," one person wrote. "I can't stop humming it," said another. At first, I was thrilled. That's what every musician wants, right? A catchy tune. But the comments kept coming, and they got darker. I heard this playing from my kid's room, but his tablet was off. I woke up at 3 AM and my smart speaker was playing this on its own. One comment just said, "Make it stop." A chill went down my spine. I went back to my computer to delete my track, to take it down. But the delete button on the hosting site was grayed out. I couldn't remove it. My heart started pounding. I tried to delete the original file on my hard drive again. File cannot be deleted. I tried renaming it, moving it, locking it. Nothing worked. It was like the file had become a permanent part of my system. That's when things started to get personal. That afternoon, I was mixing another client's project, and I heard it. Faintly, woven into the background of a pop song, was the music box melody. I ripped my headphones off. It couldn't be. I soloed the vocal track. It wasn't there. I played the whole mix again. There it was, clear as day, a ghostly echo under the singer's voice. I wasn't putting it there. It was just appearing. Panic set in. I ran a dozen virus scans. Nothing. I reformatted my main drive, reinstalled my operating system. The moment my computer booted back up, I checked the external hard drive. The melody file was still there, untouched. It was impossible. Reformatting should have wiped everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the tune. It wasn't just in my head anymore. I could hear it coming from the other room, a faint, tinny music box sound. I'd get up, and the sound would stop. My apartment, my sanctuary, started to feel like a trap. The silence was worse than the sound, because I knew it was just waiting to start again. Desperate, I started researching the estate sale where I got the drive. It belonged to an old man, a reclusive clockmaker who had passed away. I found an old newspaper article online about him. Decades ago, his only daughter had vanished without a trace. The article mentioned she had a favorite toy, a small silver music box her father had made for her. The melody it played was a tune he had composed himself. My blood ran cold. I was sure this was the melody. The digital file was a ghost, a copy of a song tied to a tragedy. The next few days were a living nightmare. The melody started bleeding into everything. It played through my phone during calls, a faint, distorted lullaby behind my friends' voices. I heard it in the static of the radio, in the hum of the refrigerator. Once, I was walking down the street, and a passing car's stereo, for just a second, blasted the tune instead of the rap song it was playing. The driver didn't even seem to notice. I was the only one who could hear its intrusion. My own music, my passion, was now a source of terror. I couldn't even listen to a song without fearing the melody would creep in. I knew I had to get rid of the hard drive. I couldn't just throw it away. What if someone else found it? I couldn't let this curse spread. I drove out to an industrial smelter on the edge of town. I explained I had some sensitive data that needed to be physically destroyed. They didn't ask questions. I stood behind a thick pane of safety glass and watched as the crane dropped my hard drive into a vat of molten metal. It was gone in a flash of light and heat. I drove home, and for the first time in weeks, there was silence. True, blissful silence. No hum, no echo, no phantom tune in the back of my mind. I cried with relief. It was over. That night, I sat down in my studio, feeling the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. I was finally free. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from my music sharing profile, the first one I'd dared to look at in days. The comment was on my track, the found lullaby. It was a new comment, posted just a minute ago. It was from a user I didn't recognize. The profile picture was blank. The comment had only 2 words. Thank you. My heart stopped. A second later, my studio monitors, which were powered off, crackled to life. And from them, louder and clearer than ever before, the music box melody began to play. It wasn't coming from a file anymore. It wasn't on a drive. It was in the system. It was in the network. I hadn't destroyed it. I had released it.